Thank you so much for coming out this evening. Welcome to UCL. My name is Uilleam. I'm an Associate Professor of Ukrainian and East European Culture at UCL SSEES. Just before we start, a couple of words of thanks to our co-organisers. That's the UCL School of Slavonic and East European Studies Centre for the Study of South Eastern Europe, the UCL SSEES Fringe Centre, the UCL Anthropocene, and the ProLine project at UCL SSEES, and we're also very grateful to the Bulgarian Cultural Institute for bringing Georgi and Angela to London. Our speakers this evening: Georgi Gospodinov, the 2023 International Booker Prize winning author of Time Shelter. The novel is published in more than 30 languages, was named Book of the Year by The New Yorker, The Guardian, and The Financial Times. Georgi Gospodinov became internationally known through his novels Natural Novel and The Physics of Sorrow, which we have here this evening. He is the winner of the Premio Strego Europeo Prize in 2021, the Central European Angelus Award in 2019, the Jan Michalski Prize in 2016, and he's been shortlisted for over a dozen other international prizes, including the Premio Gregor Bondrezori, the American Pen Translation Prize, and he has published several books of short stories, including And Other Stories, and All Turned Moon, and All Our Bodies. And La Repubblica described him as a Proust from the East. I don't know, Proust, I would say Proust is Gospodinov from the West. Angela Rodel is a literary translator, an actor, a musician who lives in Bulgaria. She holds degrees from Yale and UCLA and has received NEA and PEN translation grants. Her translation of Georgi Gospodinov's The Physics of Sorrow won the National Book Centre's 2015 Peroto Prize for the best translation from Bulgarian, the 2016 Atsil Prize for the best book of literary translation, and was nominated for three most prestigious awards in the US, the PEN Translation Prize, the National Translation Award, and the American Literary Translators Association, from the American Literary Translators Association, and 3%'s Best Translated Book Award for 2016. Her translation of Time Shelter won the International Booker Prize. Her poetry and prose translations have appeared in McSweeney's, Little Star, Ploughshares, Granta, Two Lines, and Words Without Borders, among many others. In 2014, she was awarded Bulgarian citizenship for her translation work and contribution to Bulgarian culture. And she has served as the executive director of the Bulgarian American Fulbright Commission since, and the date is missing in mine.
2015.
2015. Yeah. So please join me in welcoming our speakers for this evening. So just this morning, those of you who follow literature and translation will, I'm sure, have noticed that the long list for the International Booker Prize 2024 was announced. Sadly, no Bulgarian writers on the list this year, but last year was a Bulgarian triumph. Georgi and Angela won for Time Shelter. And I want to start with the award and the significance of this award. I mean, the International Booker Prize, probably the most prestigious award for translation into English, certainly in the world, and one of the most prestigious prizes in translation altogether. So what did winning this award mean for you personally as author, as translator, but also I'm interested to know what it meant for Bulgaria, because I understand that this was quite a big deal in Bulgaria and people really noticed this. Maybe I'll start with you. Yeah.
Първо, добър вечер на всички. Ще премина на английски, но когато говоря на български, повече приличам на простотист тук.
I'll switch into English to good evening, everyone, but when I speak Bulgarian, I sound more like the Proust of the East.
Yes, what does it mean for Bulgarian literature and for us? Actually, I meet some people on the street, and when they stop me now after the Booker Prize, some of them says, okay, we read your book even before the prize. I really love them. okay, it's much more valuable if you read my books before Booker Prize. But seriously speaking, I think that I never expected, I never seen Bulgarian people in Sofia, in Bulgaria, to be full of joy because of the book. It's very important. I've seen Bulgarians being full of joy because of the football and because of other, I don't know, we were not so often championships of anything. But anyway, this time I saw many people. I saw a huge queue of people waiting for the autograph, for the book, or just to say thank you, just to greet us. And it was very special, very unexpected for me, I must admit, feeling. So I think that for 3 days, Bulgarians, all people of my country were not divided for 3 days, which is a big success. Yes. And of course, I know that many things will start, and they started to happen in Bulgarian literature. Many of the publishers now abroad, they write to me or to Angela and to ask for, okay, what do you think about this writer or this writer? Do you have some new writers? So this is one of the goals of the award, actually. And as I said, when I received the award, and I could repeat here, maybe one of the most important things for me personally it was my fight for many years, for my first translation in Germany, when I had my first reading in Berlin. And I remember how, from the audience, they asked me, I presented them Natural Novel, my first novel. It's a novel about one couple getting divorced. And one woman from the audience asked me, why do you write this kind of things? I was like, we expected you are from Bulgaria. Yes, you are from the Balkans. So we expect from you to write more about the, what to say, Ottoman Empire, with the fighting with the Turks, with Bulgarian heroes and something like this. And I was really, what to say, disappointed. I said, okay, even in Bulgaria, we sometimes we fall in love, we get divorced, and we die in a natural way. And that's why when I received this award with Angela, I thought, okay, finally I could say, now you could expect that even in small languages, even small languages could talk about the big things, about the big topics, about the universal topics, about the memory, about the time, about the meaning of the life, and so on. And this was important.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
So now, Angela, I understand that you have been recognized in the street as a translator of this novel, which for a literary translator is almost unheard of. So
yes.
Tell us about your experience.
No, it's Uilleam is also a translator. He understands personally that I think if you do your job well, you should sort of be invisible. Like, you don't want the reader to be sitting there when they're reading, like, God, what's this translation? I mean, you should really be sort of like a ghost. And so I've been working on Bulgarian literature, on translation, since about 2005. So it'll be about 20 years now. And I think I sort of, it was a very personal calling and a personal commitment, but I had never expected, any kind of national thanks. But it's been really wonderful to people, like, literally on the streets and stores will be like, thank you. It really feels validating to say, okay, that you've dedicated your life to something and people understand and appreciate that. And also, as Georgi was saying, that I think it's really opened the door to Bulgarian literature. I think Bulgaria, unfortunately, was sort of like the black hole on the literary map, because there wasn't like that one writer, that that Milan Kundera, the Ivo Andrić, that everybody sort of thought about when they think about Bulgarian literature. And so it was very difficult as a translator, because I'd be knocking on the doors of publishers being like, "There's this great book," and they'd be like, "Oh, we already have one Bulgarian book 20 years ago. Too bad," And so And now I think, having shown that Bulgaria is a source of world literature, like it really, this is an absolutely, world-class novel. And now there's an interest, a curiosity. I was just in the States with a different book a couple weeks ago, and for the first time, publishers were coming to me and saying, "What's new in Bulgaria? Who are the interesting new writers?" And so I'm really excited. We're going to be at the London Book Fair in the next couple of days. And I really am hoping to talk to many people in the industry about, and tell them that there are many, many other really interesting books in Bulgarian. So hopefully this will open the door for a lot of other voices from Bulgaria as well.
And just to say, tomorrow we're opening for the first time Bulgarian stand in the London Book Fair, which is
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of representation and exposure of countries like Bulgaria, the country that I study and translate from Ukrainian, it's extremely important. I think it means something different than it means for German culture or French culture. I wonder, how do you see your roles as representatives of? Do you see yourselves as having a sort of responsibility in representing Bulgaria to the outside world, or are you rather thinking about just representing yourselves as writer, translator, artists, people just producing literature?
I will speak in Bulgarian. Първо, самата отговорност за писателя е със всяка следваща книга да не излъжеш читателите, които стоят зад теб.
So the first responsibility that a writer has is with every subsequent book not to disappoint or to feel like you've pulled a fast one on the readers that are already your fans and are already sort of standing behind your work.
Аз публикувах моя първи роман през 1999 година и преди това пишех поезия. И сега, когато срещам читатели, те ми казват: "Ами ние сме родени в годината, на когато публикувахте първия си роман." И това са няколко различни поколения и това е страшно важно да поддържаш разговора с различни поколения читатели.
So I published my first novel in 1999, and before that I've been writing poetry. And so now I have readers come to me and say, "Hey, I was actually born in the year when you first published your first novel." And so there's a sense of responsibility that you're having to hold a conversation with readers of many different generations at this point.
А за навън, вижте, ако си представим света или Европа като една книжарница, има такива книжарници в Лондон, Don't Books е една от тях.
So if we imagine Europe as sort of a bookstore, there's Don't Books in London that has different languages, different books from different languages.
Където има различни етажерки на различните страни и континенти.
So every country or continent has its own shelf.
Българския шелф, българската етажерка не е много голяма.
The Bulgarian shelf is not particularly large.
Често я няма.
And often doesn't even exist.
Понякога е между унгарската и румънската.
Somewhere there between Hungary and Romania.
Моята скрита мечта е един ден, като вляза в Don't Books, да видя една хубава етажерка с български книги.
So my dream is one day when I go into Don't Books is to see a nice big bookshelf full of Bulgarian books.
И това ще стане.
It'll happen.
And how about you, Angela? Do you feel a kind of weight of responsibility as one of very few, I guess, translators from Bulgarian?
Absolutely. I think there is a sense of responsibility because you're putting someone else's art and their words into a different voice, and so there's a sense of you're wanting to be faithful and respectful to the author's intention, but all of us who have gone to graduate school know that, Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author, like the work has a sort of a life of its own, and we also have to sort of we want the work to resonate with the English reading public as well. So there's this very delicate balance between how much do I massage the text or, sort of interpret the text for the reader. And especially it's very different if you're working with a living author, which is awesome. Usually, it's really, Georgi is so generous with his time and his intellect, and he works with all of his translators. And most Bulgarian authors that I've worked with have been. But the other book that I most recently translated, The Case of Jem, by Vera Mutovcheva, she's passed away. And so I don't have access to the author. In that case, I feel an incredible sense of responsibility because I never met her. I've talked to her family, to her colleagues, but still it's not the same. And so I'm like, okay, I'm her voice in English. I'm representing this author and the characters and her work in the way that she would like to be represented. So I think there is a sense that I want to make sure that I'm being sensitive to all the nuances of the text and presenting them in a way that is, going to be respectful to the author.
Yeah, and as you know, Angela visited Bulgaria for the first time because of the Bulgarian songs, because of the singing. And so she had тя има ухо, както казваме на български. As we said in Bulgarian, I don't know, could I say this? She had an ear for the language, for the rhythm, and for me it's very important because I'm coming from poetry, and for me every line is important in the novels. I know my books are not easy for translating, so Angela really did a great job with it.
Yeah, and actually, one of the first times I came to London was a PEN event where there was a bunch of us translators from all different languages in Europe, and we were sitting around having a beer afterwards, and it turned out every single one of us was a musician. I think this is not coincidence. I think you need to have an ear,
Very, very common, I think.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the relationship with the translator. Now, I guess you have more and more translators after the success of Time Shelter. Tell us about your relationship with the translators. What do you have a close relationship with most of them? I guess it must be different in different languages.
Yeah. There is this famous saying, famous for us, for Bulgarians, from one translator in Mexico, a translator from Bulgaria to Spanish. And he says something like, there are many ways to die.
There are many exquisite ways of starving yourself to death, and translating from Bulgarian is one of them.
So this will change. It's changing. It's changing.
If any of our students of Bulgarian language,
I'm very well fed, But no, the great thing is I think it's not very common for translators to actually live where their author lives, and I feel like I'm very, very honored in that way because I live in Sofia, and Georgi has been great about introducing me to his other translators. So when they come through Sofia, I get to meet them, his French, German, Croatian, all different kinds of translators. And it's really nice for us to have that community. And sometimes we reach out, we talk to each other and be like, oh, what did you do about this, play on words? What did you do about this? There's some kind of cultural realia. And it's an incredible wealth of knowledge. Somebody who's read the book as closely as we have, all of us translators, it's really helpful for us to have that community. So thank you, Georgi, for doing that.
But I must say that in the beginning, it wasn't easy at all for the translators. And now it's not so easy, but because the translators from Bulgaria, they also should be something like literary agents. I remember that the first translations of natural novel, they were in Serbian, in French, and my French translator translated almost the full novel without having publishing house. So she started to looking for publishing houses in French, and it was very difficult. And she did it as a literary agent. We didn't have, of course, literary agencies. Nobody then wanted to be a literary agent of a Bulgarian writer. Not to die, to starving. but so it's important also, that's why we should mention that our translators sometimes are also our literary agents, or were our literary agents. And with the translators, I really believe to the translators who have questions, who write to me with questions, who say, okay, I don't understand this, or I feel that this is kind of quotation or allusion to some other author, but could you tell me more? this is a real act of translating. And yeah, I have many stories. I collect them. One day I will tell them. I will publish them. But this is the great thing, to work with the translators, because the translators actually are the best readers, the deepest readers that we could imagine.
Yeah, so let's talk about the product of this process, the book, and let's talk about Time Shelter first of all. So there are, I guess many of us will have read the book, will be familiar with the book, but there are sort of two main conceits here. One is the construction of a certain type of clinic for people who are losing their memories, to sort of bring them back to their childhoods by recreating rooms, which carefully reconstruct the environment of their childhood, domestic environment. And the other is a kind of desire at a political level, collective level, to return to the past. So there are these referendums on the past that happen in different countries in Europe, and people are voting which decade do they want their society to go back to, to make X country great again. So that's the main premise. But I think before we talk about it, maybe we can read a little bit of the novel.
Okay. And unfortunately, Georgi doesn't have the Bulgarian, so we'll just hear the English. Does anyone have it?
Okay.
Somebody-
Okay.
Yes, please. Okay.
Докато помниш, държиш миналото на страна, като да си запалил огън насред нощна гора. Наоколо са наклякали демони и вълци, зверовете на миналото стесняват кръга. Нощи не смеят да прекрачат. Алегорията е проста. Докато огънят на паметта гори, ти си господарят. Почне да загасва, воят ще се усилва и зверовете ще идват все по-близо. Глутницата на миналото. Колкото по-малко памет, толкова повече минало. Малко преди края времената ще се смесят, защото клетките са отворени и всички ще изпълзят навън. Ако не са дните, в какво ще живеем, викаше един поет, как му беше името. А дни няма. Календар се е саморазпуснал, има само един ден и една нощ и те се повтарят вечно. Помня, за да държа миналото в миналото.
The less memory, the more past. As long as you remember, you hold at bay the times gone by, like lighting a fire in the middle of a forest at night. Demons and wolves are crouching all around. The beasts of the past are tightening the circle, but they still don't dare step into it. The allegory is simple. As long as the flame of memory burns, you are the master. If it starts to die out, the howling grows louder and the beasts draw closer, the pack of the past. Shortly before the end, times get mixed up, because the cages have been opened and everyone will creep out. If it weren't for the days, where will we live, a poet asked. What was his name again? But the days are gone. The calendar has dismissed itself. There's only one day and one night, and they repeat eternally. I remember, so as to keep the past in the past.
That was wonderful, thank you. The novel it's on the one hand, it's about memory on a psychological, personal level, but also on a collective and political level. It's about memory in Bulgaria. It's very much a novel which has parts of it which are about Bulgaria, which are very focused on Bulgaria, but it's also a European novel as well. I was reading it, I felt this is really a novel about Europe and its relationship with its own past. So I wonder, was that something that you wanted to explore with the novel, the way that Europe sees itself, its identity, and its own past? It's restricted to the EU. we don't have the UK is not part of
It is, yeah. Because when some of the Bulgarian critics and academics, scholars. We had a discussion in Sofia University. They asked me, why you wrote with this kind of irony, with this grotesque about Bulgaria? I answered that, no, it's not about Bulgaria. It's about every European country. But the problem is that when I started to write this novel, it was after 2016. And here you know well what happened in 2016. But also 2016 was connected with the election of Trump. And with all this feeling, and it's a personal feeling, not only political feeling. For me, this is important to keep in the mind that what happened in the world, what happened with some elections, it's also a personal thing. I remember clearly this early morning in Europe when Trump was elected. I thought I was with my wife and my daughter. My daughter she slept in another room, and my wife started to cry. Okay, why we are crying? Because Trump was elected. It's behind, yeah.
I was crying.
What
I
is
was crying.
It's not connected with me, but it's connected with me. It's connected with all of us, and it's because of the fighting between arrogance and human conditions in a way. And that's why then I had this idea already about the clinics of the past. And this idea was very, innocent. I mean, the clinics of the past were something good. They were good for the people with dementia, with the people who are losing their memory because they reconstruct their memories. You have floors of the 1940s, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you can put the patients with the memory loss in the specific floor, the floor of the decade that they still remember it. And they will feel kind of облегчение.
Relief.
Yeah. But after 2016, I realized that it's not an innocent thing. The past is not innocent anymore. That the past has a dark side, the nostalgia has a dark side. And that the nostalgia could be instrumentalized, it could be weaponized in a way. And what these politicians did, they did these things, they weaponized the nostalgia. And that's why I continued with the second part, with this topic. The first part is also kind of dystopian, but anyway, the dark dystopian second part of the novel, to tell how dangerous could be nostalgia. And yeah, I started with Europe because you could see this in Europe very clearly, and for me Europe matters more. and that's why I started with this European countries referendum for the past. Yeah.
And this movement of the novel from country to country, from time to time, I guess that would be a big challenge for you as a translator. So tell us a little bit about the difficulties of translating such a geographically and temporally wide-ranging novel.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm so lucky that I live very close to Georgi. I could always call him up and say, hey, let's have a coffee, let's talk about this. But it was interesting because we had worked on Physics of Sorrow together, and the US publisher did not allow footnotes. Like, that's their policy, no footnotes. And so we had, kind of done a lot of acrobatics to try, because there's so much reference to socialism, things that, an American reader has no cultural context for. And so we'd kind of gone into Time Shelter just thinking that we couldn't use footnotes. So I remember we were, how are we going to explain there's those two scenes in Bulgaria where there's the sort of national revivalists and then there's the sort of socialist, nostalgia. And there's so many references to Bulgarian literature, to songs, to popular culture. And it was just, how on earth? And And I remember the publisher had sent me some books as a gift that are in their list. And I remember I was like, Georgi, these are footnotes. I see footnotes in here. And so I reached out to the publisher and said, can we use footnotes? And they said, of course you can. But then we decided, we talked about it. We're like, we don't want to go overboard with that. We want it to come through in the story, the atmosphere and the vibe. And so we really worked to keep them at a bare minimum, only when there was, I mean, at some point the references, the Bulgarian references are so fast and so furious. I think the only footnotes are really in that scene, those two scenes. Otherwise, we really tried to keep it woven into the text, a lot of these references. Also language-wise, we talked a lot about, Georgi had been very careful about when he's talking about the 1950s to use language from the 1950s. And so I would think about, I asked my parents, they're, pretty much Cold War era. I'm like, is this something you would have said as a young person? Trying to make sure that the English as well had a sense of like being in a time period. So there were a lot of different challenges, and we sort of used different strategies to cope with them.
And I was interested that you mentioned the word dystopia, because that's why I wanted to ask you about it. So this is obviously a novel about the past, and the physics of sorrow also is a work that engages with the past. It's kind of quite similar themes about memory and history, but in Time Shelter, it's also a novel about the future, or a potential future. And I something that I heard you say in another interview, you said that you're interested in the past because the past is full of stories, but the future is empty. And I was really interested in that. And I suppose, well, what's happening here, it's about the potential ways in which the manipulation of the past and the could go, based on the present. But do you see yourself as a dystopian writer? Do you think of yourself in that kind of Orwellian tradition?
Thank you for this question. It's quite serious. I will continue in Bulgaria, but I must say, finally, because of these questions, I invented that maybe this is a kind of dystopian realism. if you can imagine something like this, but this is not novel about the past. Time Shelter. It's set in tomorrow. The problem is that tomorrow looks like yesterday. So that's because it's not a novel about time traveling into the past. It's not a time machine. It's not about time machine. It's not to go back to the past. It's about how dangerous could be if we bring the past here. If we decide to bring the past, not to go there, but to bring it here, to say, okay, we want to live now, we want to have all times when we were young and happy. I want to live in 2024, but I want to live like in 1968, I want to live like when I was 12. This is more or less connected with our fears from the future, of course, and with this strange feeling that now, at this moment, we are allowed to have all different times and one time, all different times in this minute, now and here, which is typical, because I had some discussion after publishing this novel, and they were one of the most interesting discussions with theologians in Italy. They invited me to discuss the end of the time and the apocalypse, yes, because it's also a novel about the end of the times. And you know that in the apocalypse, actually, it's not the end of the space. It's not like I imagined it when I was a child, like the end of the world with the fires, with the floods, with the horses, with the trumpets. No, it's not the end of the space, it's the end of the time. But what does it mean, the end of the time? The end of the time means that all the times will coexist, will happen in the same time. This is the end of the time. This is the zatvaranje na времето.
Like the closing of time.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that now we have this feeling that we could live, we could exist in all the times, and if we want, we could go back to the 44, I could say, but it's only one person wants to be there. Yeah. Only dictators love to be back in the wars, in the war times. So this is, this is my answer.
We were speaking about Physics of Sorrow before, which is, like I said, a book that deals with similar subject matter, but I guess on a more private or personal level. And I think we also have a short piece of that we could read.
Yes, the Physics of Sorrow, actually, има ли някой физика на тъгата? Няма. Okay, the Physics of Sorrow is quite different, but also it's the first book where the name Time Shelter appeared. There is a chapter called Time Shelter, and Galstin, the main character of the Time Shelter, have some role, some part of this event here. And I will read very short text about how our personal history coincides with the political history. 79. I know by heart the Bulgarian. Всъщност целият период на моя пубертет може да бъде кратко описан през призмата на политическия контекст на 80-те. Първа целувка с момиче, Брежнев умира. Втора целувка с различно момиче, Черненко умира. Трета целувка, Андропов умира. Аз ли ги убивам? Първи несръчен секс в парка, Чернобил. Следва дълъг период на полуразпад.
In fact, the whole period I was in puberty can be briefly described through the prism of the complex political context of the 80s. First kiss, with a girl. Brezhnev dies. Second kiss, different girl. Chernenko dies. Third kiss, Andropov dies. Am I killing them? First fumbling sex in the park, Chernobyl. A long half-life of exponential decay ensues.
Georgi, I feel like we have to talk about Putin now. I guess there's this sense of the intersection of the political and the personal and big historical events and personal biographies. It's something that's very much present in your work, but I feel like it's something which actually is also characteristic of literature from Southeastern Europe, East Central Europe, places where there have been, the 20th century especially, but not only the 20th, has been very tumultuous, where this is, the area of wars and revolutions and empires and the rise of nations and the fall of nations and ideologies and all these kind of things. And at the same time, people are living through, like you said, they're also falling in love and getting married and dying and all these kind of things. Would you say that combination of the two is very characteristic of this kind of larger regional literature? And I wonder, do you see yourself as part of a tradition maybe in that sense? Because when I read your work, I added your work to my course that I teach with some colleagues at UCL on literature and memory, and there we have Dubravka Ukrašić and Milan Kundera and Daniel Kish, and there are so many, actually. We could do a whole degree program on this.
Yes, and the good thing is that also from Western point of view, they realize this. They have, in this article that you mentioned about the Prus and so on, actually it's an article about the 4 writers from our part of the world about Dubravka Ugrišić, Svetlana Alexievich, Olga Tokarczuk, Mircea Cărtărescu, and about my book. And yeah, this is very important. I think that there is something like, what to say, rodstvo po izboru.
Like a chosen family, chosen family.
Yeah, between us. We share this similar experience, being part of this kind of this part of the world. Similar experience, similar sensitiveness, and yes, this is the persons that with some of them I'm friend with. I was friend with Dubravka Ugrišić, who passed away last year, I think, or 2 years ago, and her writing was very important also for my thinking. I like very much The Culture of Lie, her book with essays. I strongly recommend it. And also Mircea Cărtărescu from Romania. We are writing about this experience when you're a child in the kind of totalitarian times, and he's a bit more on the side of magic realism, but anyway, I feel we are very close. And of course, Kundera was very important for me when I was 17, 18, 20 years old, and after that, all of his books were very important to me, because I realized that, okay, I can write also in this way. The novel, you don't need to have a killer in the novel, or you don't need to answer the question who is the killer at the end of the novel. The novel could be quite wider, and to collect all our thoughts, even essays. That, yeah, thanks to Kundera and some other writers, I realized that I could be really free and could leave the boundaries of the novel. And this was important knowledge for me. That's why I'm thankful to all of these writers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that transcending of genres and kind of hybridized genres is absolutely something very characteristic. And I wanted to ask you, Angela, do you, in working with Georgi's work, do you look at other writers from Bulgaria or from the wider region who have been translated? Are there kind of translators who you look to as role models in a way to help you kind of think about how to translate this type of literature?
Yeah, no, I definitely try and kind of keep abreast of the region as well. But I think, Olga Tokarczuk, I remember reading Flights and being like, oh wow, this sounds very familiar, and it gave me kind of a little bit of a sense of, how we could, the tone of Time Shelter. Although I think Georgi is maybe more humorous, a little more light in some ways, but I think there is a resonance there, and of course Dubravka Ugrišić as well. But getting back to what Georgi was talking about, I think in my day job, I'm the head of the Fulbright Commission, and now everybody is all up at, countering disinformation, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, read Eastern European literature. Like, this is, basically, people have grown up in this, of course it's different now with social media, but the idea of being surrounded by this discourse that everyone knows is fake, and trying to find a sense of truth, and that often is in personal things, where the sense of what's real is what's personal, and having to talk one way, but think another way, and holding those two levels together. I feel like there's so much we can learn, because in the West we kind of are, for the first time, feeling the heat of Russian propaganda in 2016. But I'm like, these people have lived through this for 50 years. There's so much we can learn about making meaning and preserving a sense of meaning and truth, even though you're surrounded by this layer of just lies, and I feel like sometimes that's why it's so important for us to read these writers, because they're all talking in many ways of how they preserve their sort of humanity despite being in this system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more, and especially working with Ukrainian literature myself, I have exactly the same thoughts about it, especially right now. Okay, I think I've asked enough questions. We will throw the floor open to your questions now. We do have a microphone which we can pass down to you. So I can see a couple of hands already. So there was, yes, gentleman here was first one.
Hi. Does it work? Can you hear me? Yeah. I spent 29 years of my life in communist Poland. So I have a comment to make and a question to ask. The comment, I don't know whether it was your working, but this morning BBC World Service, BBC Radio 4 had a program with 4 writers. One Nobel Prize winner who published a book called Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. Book number 2 was Why We Remember, and the book number 3 is Nostalgia. Now, I recommend to all of you to look it up on BBC Radio 4 and listen to it. Now, coming back to my question, I read all East European, Spanish, and Italian literature in Polish. And the reason being that my language is much nearer in terms of playfulness to those languages. English is very rich in words, but it's not playful. I have read your books and I read your books in Polish. Yeah. The time shelter in Polish is called schron przeciwczasowy. Now, in English, we have bomb shelters where we shelter from bombs, and we have dog shelters where dogs shelter from us. Now, is this time shelter against time or for the time to shelter in?
That's why I like Bulgarian language, because I don't need to explain this. Because we have времеубежище is the Bulgarian word, time shelter, like in English, but in some other languages you need to specify it. Is it a shelter from time or shelter in time? Both, of course, both of them. You can shelter it from time into another time. So it's both should be work. How it's in Polish? You don't need to specify this.
Schron przeciwczasowy, so it's against the time.
It's against. So you okay.
You shelter from the time. Then you shelter your time.
Yeah. Actually, the question of titles is very interesting. Usually I always had problems with titles. Like the physics of sorrow was very difficult to be translated, not because of the physics is easy, but because of the sorrow. And we talked with Angela, and she told me that there was a kind of paper about how difficult it is to translate the Slavic concept of sorrow, because it's a concept, it's not a title. When we say, I like the Bulgarian word taga, it's a short word with which is typical Bulgarian vocal, and with this moving of Adam Apple, which is important for the swallowing something that you don't want to share, to tell to other people. And it's a part of the Bulgarian sorrow. I mean, the phonetic of the word is part of the explanation of Bulgarian sorrow. But but it's not. Yeah, in Polish it's smutku. I think they translate it as smutku. Of course, it's a kind of the concept close to the Chekhov's longing, this light sorrow, like the Three Sisters, to be somewhere else, to be in Moscow. Yes. So the question of titles is very important, but actually it's a new word in Bulgaria, also in the Polish translation. This word doesn't exist. But the funny thing was that this year they voted for the word of the year in Bulgaria. And времеубежище, time shelter, was one of the 3 words of the year. For the word that doesn't exist anymore, actually.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
But yes, it's connected also with bomb shelter in Bulgaria. It's connected with bomb shelter, of course.
So there was one.
Thank you, Angela and Georgi, from another Georgi. My question is about the degrees of freedom of the author and the translator. Степените на свобода. You dismissed the reader who was asking about the Turkish fight against the Turks, but as an author, can you be a James Joyce all the time and write stream of consciousness or whatever you want to write? Or do you have to think about how what you will write be understood and appreciated?
Or translated.
Or and translate. So on the other side, for the in the translation, does it feel like a golden cage sometimes? And the Italians have this beautiful pun, traduttore traditore, translator traitor. So maybe does Georgi sometimes reassure you that actually you're doing not just criticize, but
Окей. Не, аз искам да им бъде трудно на преводачите.
He wants to make our lives difficult as translators.
Затова не мисля и с тяхната глава. Ще бъде много трудно, ако мисля с главата си на писател и с главата на как това би било преведено.
So he doesn't think about us. It'd be even more difficult if you had to think about, as a writer and then also think about what it would be like for the translators.
Но вижте, единственото, за което мисли човек, когато пише, или когато пише, единственото, за което мисля, е как да разкаже по-добре една история.
So the only thing the writer is thinking about when they're writing is how to best tell the story.
И после неочаквани неща се оказват непреводими.
And then the unexpected things turn out to be untranslatable.
Неща, за които не си мислил, че ще бъдат непреводими или трудно преводими.
Things that you'd never suspected would be untranslatable or difficult to translate.
Смешна история.
A funny story.
Полска преводачка трябваше да преведе един стих мой, който се казваше "Ти си солницата, дето не пуска".
So his Polish translator had to translate a short verse that was that you are the salt shaker that doesn't, give salt, it doesn't shake. It's hard to translate in English too, actually. What do you say, plugged up.
На български буквалния план е абсолютно ясен за всички, общо знание. Нашите солници не пускат, трябва да ги удреш.
So in Bulgarian, this is absolutely clear. I mean, the Bulgarian salt shaker is known for being plugged up, and you have to always bang it on the table before it actually salts.
И след като разбереш този първи пласт, има втори сексуален, еротичен.
So after you understand this first level, there's the second erotic level.
И тази полска преводачка с голямо неудобство ми писа. Вижте, дали това е някакъв специален вид солница?
So the Polish translator, with very great amount of embarrassment, wrote to Georgi and was like, "Is this some kind of special salt shaker?"
Не, това е най-обикновената солница.
This is your average, ordinary, your everyday salt shaker.
И така не се получи стихотворението на полски.
And so the verse didn't really come out in Polish.
Просто защото преводача не превежда думи, той превежда и контекст. Нали? Това е най-сложната част от превода.
Yeah, so the translator isn't just translating the words, they're translating the context, and that's actually the most complicated part of translation.
I am puzzled because our salt shakers are like Bulgarian.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. So yesterday, 20 Days in Mariupol by Ukrainian director Mstislav Chernov won an Oscar for Best Documentary. And now the world knows that Ukrainians make good documentary films and also that there's a genocidal war in Ukraine. You won a literary Oscar last year, and now the world knows that you can write about big themes in Bulgarian, right? And part of me is thrilled about this visibility through prizes, and part of me is absolutely resentful that our cultures have to prove that they exist through this kind of international visibility. So the question I have, how do you feel about this dwelling in the shadows unless the big guys let us into their limelight? And how do we change this cultural imperialism on our terms?
Културен империализъм?
Да, как да го променим, но значи.
Actually, after the Booker Prize, finally, the characters of my novel, or I mean the shadow characters of my novel, the nationalists and populists, finally they read the book, and it's something, yeah. It's what to say. Sometimes it's frightening because a month ago in the Bulgarian parliament, there was a question, official question from one of the group of nationalists to the Minister of Culture, why they supported the translation, some of the translation of this book. We have this fund that supported all the translation of book, but why they especially supported the translation of this book, which is anti-Bulgarian book. So it's and it's a long talk. Of course, the most hardest pages in these books are about the Bulgarian kind of nationalism. They're about this kitchen nationalism everywhere, but because I know more, and for me it's, I want to say it's more important to talk about what I know better, this Bulgarian kind of kitchen nationalism. I realize how the book, I think it changed the talk a bit in Bulgaria. Now, when you see the biggest Bulgarian national flag, when they put on the Rožen, and people start to laughing in a way, saying, okay, but it was described here about the biggest Bulgarian flag in Sofia. And one of the important things is to work on the taste, because working on the taste is also political work. And we realize this now, also with the elections in the US, the next elections in the US, also with all the elections that we made. I wrote in the second part of this book about the referendums of the past, about the elections. What is important when you make your elections? It's not just stupid political abstract words or slogans. It's not economy. We are not made of economy. It's not other kind of very important things, gross domestic products and so on and so on. No, it's about the taste that you elaborated in your life, and that you can recognize the kitsch of nationalism from the serious things. Because now what we have, and I always think that literature could help in this. Now what we have is the great battle of the of the stories. On the one side, we have these politicians and politics that are populists who know how to tell their stories. They know. They know, and I think that we really should be better than. We should tell better our stories than them. It's a question of it's a question of taste. It's a question of storytelling. It's a question of putting in the right way the person in the middle, because it's very important. The fighting is about the persons. It's about about our thinking, because if they change our thinking, they change the system. And that's what I can help with my stories.
But I think, also to talk about maybe the more outward looking from Alessa's question, to me, I mean, yes, there are the gatekeepers that are sort of, imposing this sort of outside, this is, the cultural imperialism, this is how, but these are strange books, and they still touch people, they still move people, they still blow people's minds, and I think that's a good example of Georgi and writers like Olga Tokarczuk doing things on their own terms, because these are not what you'd read coming out of a US MFA program. These aren't very linear, they're very, the styles themselves, and that's what I love about Bulgarian literature, because people don't go into those sort of literary molds that we have come to expect, at least in the United States, as this is what a novel should be. And to me, that's where I see the possibility, is that, okay, Georgi won the biggest prize in the world without writing a novel that fit
the American or the English standard of like this is how a novel should be. He did it in his own sort of very unique, very fragmentary storytelling way, and it still worked, and it still reached that audience. And so that's where I see this sort of possibility opening up for pushing back against that kind of cultural imperialism. Although it's a very valid question.
So right at the back, the lady with the watch. Yes.
Hello. First of all, welcome to UCL. I'm one of the students here. And second, I want to start by saying thank you, because I'm Bulgarian and this is my first chance to ever speak to you in person. And what I want to thank you for is adding a bit to your anecdote of like people telling you that they were born in 1999 when you published your first novel. I was born in 2003. But what I want to thank you for is your literature is what made me fall in love with Bulgarian language and Bulgarian literature and Българското слово. Because when I was 13, one of your books was the first thing I ever picked up without a teacher forcing me to read it. And then I read everything you ever wrote within like a couple of months of that, and it's really been a big thing for me. So thank you for that, firstly. And then second to my question, I want to go a bit philosophical and inspired by the title of today's talk, which was advertised as "Does the Past Have an Expiration Date?" So inspired by that and my recently reading 1984 by George Orwell, and this kind of like dystopian idea of if we don't remember the past, we're bound to repeat it. And of course, that's like a very universal understanding around the world and obviously a central topic of your books. So personally, my memory and my knowledge of history and how things were, for example, in Bulgaria, as I said, born in 2003, I haven't had the 39 years or what the other person said of living in communism and so on. My memory of that, which obviously doesn't come from my experience, comes in big part from your writing and then in another part from the stories of my grandparents' youth. So this is a sort of memory that's not mine. It's a sort of collective memory that I have developed and I'm really thankful to have. But still, to the extent that I have it is very, very limited. And I'm seeing even like my younger siblings and like other people from the next generation, everyone just being on TikTok and whatnot, and the way that the education system is, for example, in Bulgaria, but no doubt it's the same everywhere around the world. We don't really get to properly learn about the past, and hence we will be doomed to repeat it at some point. And now, so my question to you is, for those that won't be so fortunate to be that touched by your books, and that won't necessarily develop that collective memory of whether that be what happened in Bulgaria or somewhere else around the world, how do we make sure we don't lose that memory? And I know that you've previously said you don't want to go into politics, and that's a shame for not going to fix the Bulgarian education system. But that goes as a question to the both of you, because I know you both have daughters, and I know Angela has written about your experience with your daughter studying in Bulgaria, and then obviously you being on the Fulbright Commission. So let's talk about education in Bulgaria and around the world.
Говоря за образованието и
That's actually really interesting because my question was going to push on the same thread. So perhaps we can group the answer. Up to you, though. So I got back from Bulgaria about 2 hours ago, having spent my first third of March ever in Bulgaria this year. So my question also relates to what you were saying, Georgi, about the unfurling of the great big giant Bulgarian flag and kind of how that ties into dragging the past, kind of kicking and screaming into the present. So again, my question kind of is just to get your thoughts on where you think Bulgaria might be heading going forwards.
Къде отива България в бъдещето, имайки предвид и големите знамена, че всичко
Our time is running short. I think I'm going to take one last question from the lady here, because I saw her hand, and then that's probably going to be it, I'm afraid.
My question is not so much about the memory and what we want to remember from the past, but our life journey. What made us what we are presently is going through that everybody's life's past is different. when I was a tiny little girl, I was told by my parents, don't you dare to say anything in school what we speak at home. And this makes the character and the persons that we are. This is the formative years. And then later on, I left the country simply because I wanted to be able to say what I think into open and not, but this made us, it's not a question of how we memorize the past. It is question that our life journey has made us today what we are. Our fight to survive, our fight to readjust to the different, and going back is what we are, our formation into the world and into the future.
Okay, thank you. And there's a moment in Physics of Sorrow where we have the exact same thing, that the child has said, don't say in public what you hear at home. This is the same in Physics of Sorrow.
Викат, точно това има във физиката, детето те му казва неделя, казва това, което бащата слуша там свободно.
So many questions. I wrote a book about Alzheimer's, so if I miss something, sorry. But anyway, there are questions around the memory, about memory and how what we could learn from our stories, from our books, and how the memory and education in Bulgaria are connected or not connected in a way. Actually, I'm very glad, thank you for your first question and saying, because when I wrote my books, I didn't think about the translation, but anyway, I had in my head a kind of a reader. And this reader was on my age, or even older than me, because I write for someone who has this kind of memory, who will understand me. And the best thing that happened with these books was that they were read by people, young people on your age. And I had the best talks around the books, about these books, with this kind of people, 19, 20, 25 years old. And in this talk, I asked them, okay, what was important for you? Because you don't know all these stories. They are not part of your, your essential memory. They are something that you heard, the stories. And they told me, yeah, in a way, first these books are kind of our never happened talks with our parents. Because in Bulgarian society, we have this kind of culture of silence, culture of untold stories into the family. They are connected also, of course, with patriarchy, patriarchal feelings, or I don't know, but also with the fear, with the communist regime. Our parents preserved us, and they never told us about the past, about their past. Even in the families, I explored this. Even in the families when people had some relatives who was in the prison or who was killed from the communists, they keep silence about this. They never talk to their kids because it's something that could be dangerous for them. Or when when our parents, they used to listen this forbidden Radio Free Europe or Deutsche Welle, they used to listen it locked into the kitchens. So in a way, and we should say this, kind of Bulgarian, the people in Bulgaria, kind of dissidents Дисидентството на българските хора понякога се заключваше, опираше до това да слушат Радио Свободна Европа в България.
So a lot of times the dissidence was limited to that, listening to Radio Free Europe.
И това не е обвинение.
I'm not accusing people.
Моя баща правеше същото.
My dad did the same thing.
Но като дете аз имах този спомен, че той върши нещо, което от една страна е героично, защото е забранено, но от друга страна е опасно, непозволено.
So as a child, I have this memory of him doing something that on the one hand was heroic because it was forbidden, but on the other hand was something very dangerous.
И знаех, че не трябва да говоря за това навън.
And I knew I shouldn't talk about it outside the house.
И тази особена шизофрения е нещо, което не отмина така лесно след падането на комунизма.
And that kind of schizophrenia did not pass easily then, even after the fall of communism.
Защото това е начин на мислене, което не можеш просто да кажеш след 89-та не, ние. Изведнъж станахме други.
It's a mindset, so even after 1989 it wasn't that we became different people.
И на мен много ми се иска в книгите си да говоря за тези неща.
So I really want my books to talk about these things.
Да, знам, че губя читатели, говорейки за тези неща.
And I know that I lose readers because I do talk about these things, but
никой не обича да му кажеш, че не се е променил много.
Nobody likes to be told that they haven't changed.
Но да, това са неща. Смесвам отговора си на трите въпроса като в едно.
I'm mixing my answers to all three questions into one, but that's.
Да, тези неща са ни формирали, но и за добро, и за лошо. И затова ние трябва да рефлектираме върху тях.
Yeah, these things have formed us, but in a good way and a bad way, and that's why we need to reflect on them.
На въпроса на къде в бъдещето нямам отговор.
But to the question about where is Bulgaria headed, I have no answer to that.
Не само за България.
And not just for Bulgaria.
Thank you so much, Georgi, and thank you for such amazing interpreting. It's wonderful.
It's a little terrifying in front of a room of about 100 bilingual Bulgarian and so I'm putting that out there. So.
I would be really,
yeah.
I would be really sweating in your position. Unfortunately, time has beaten us, so we have to finish off. But before we do it, just a couple of things to say. Please keep an eye out for future events at UCL School of Slavonic and East European Studies, on our various centres who supported this event, the Centre for Study of South Eastern Europe, Uilleam and Fringe Centre. Fringe, not Fringe. Also UCL Anthropocene, please check that out as well. And thank you again to the Bulgarian Cultural Institute.
Can I make a picture of you?
Yes!
Oh, you stand apart.